Welcome to the Awesemo Early Bird Podcast. It's your old pal Emac coming to you on a Thursday morning with one Adam, Ship My Money Sharer. As we're recording this late on All Hallows Eve, yes, kiddies, it's Halloween. Adam, did you do any trick-or-treating?
No, I did not. I stayed in my house, pretended nobody was home so that people wouldn't ring my doorbell, and had a good Halloween.
Nice. I was downstairs answering the door, and we live in a cul-de-sac, so we got all sorts of we're like the only family that doesn't have at least 3 kids. We don't have any, and all the other families around us have 3 or 4. So there was a parade of all the little guys coming through and girls coming through. And then once it got dark, it was like the older kids coming through. And then I was like, damn, I've blown through 8 bags of candy because I was just general. I'm like, oh, 2 for you, 2 for you. Here you go. Have some. I'm like, we need to turn out the lights because it's 8 o'clock and I don't have any candy left. And I'm saving the last couple Butterfingers for myself. So
yeah, as you should.
So we turned those off, and then we just started. We had our dinner and enjoyed. But here we are recording. We got word 2 minutes after lock this evening that one Tyus Jones was not going to play. The frustrating thing about that was, well, yes, it was 2 minutes after the lock of that game, but these darn NBA squads don't actually tip off till about 12 minutes past the hour, and in some cases as many as almost 15, which is frustrating because you'll see NBA game says it'll start at 7. The same night, an MLB game says it'll start at 7:07, and the MLB game will always start before.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous how they start late as frequently as Josh and I start late on our strategy show. It's pretty ridiculous.
There we are. You guys are honoring Mr. Silver and the rest of the NBA. In any event, we've got a 6-gamer here on Thursday, something that we do not normally see. We've got over-unders for the first 4 games. We've got Denver at Cleveland, 226, Denver by 6. We have the Clippers at Philly. Philly's home favorites by 4.5. It's a 228. We've got OKC at Charlotte. Charlotte actually favored by 1.5, 227 over under. And then Sacramento is road favorites by 1.5, which normally would be crazy, even against Atlanta, 231 over under. But good God, I almost wish I'd rather had the Sacramento Kings to root for instead of the Washington Wizards.
Yeah, Kings have actually been pretty impressive this year, but that's a game in general that I think should be really good for fantasy purposes. 2 of the fastest-paced teams in the league. Actually, I think last I looked, Atlanta was 1 and Sacramento was 2 in pace, and neither one plays a whole lot of defense either. I think that's going to be a great, great game for fantasy.
Yes, which is just wild. And then the last 2 games that we'll talk about, we have Milwaukee and Boston. We don't have a line on that one yet. Of course, Kyrie Irving is on bereavement. He should be back for that game, but we'll have to check. Hey, because Tyus Jones should have started as far as we know tonight, so you never really know. And then New Orleans, Portland, of course, we have Anthony Davis, who has not yet tipped off with all of those 10:30 those 3 10:30 tip-off games on the West Coast Wednesday night here. We are assuming he is supposed to play because they tweeted that he would, and that game is not tipped off yet. But, of course, there always could be an in-game injury with him. But we're going to go by position here to kind of keep things organized. We will utilize DraftKings here as our main guide for pricing, since that's where Adam and I play most of our contests. And then we will look at anything that jumps out on FanDuel and Yahoo, because I do like to dabble at Yahoo a little bit. But on DraftKings here, we've got Russell Westbrook at 10,700 as the only player in 5 figures at the guard position. We have Damian Lillard a tick below at 9,900. And then we're checking in with some intriguing players here like Drew Holiday on a back-to-back. We should see Elfrid Payton back on Thursday night. He is sitting out Wednesday night, but he had that ankle sprain that he's destined to be, or I don't want to say destined, he is targeting Thursday to be back. But of course, if that doesn't go well, he may sit out until the weekend. But those are kind of our high and low end guys. What at your first look seems intriguing? And I hope you start with Kemba Walker.
Yeah, I mean, Kemba, he disappointed against Miami at massive ownership, but we only got a pretty marginal price increase, and we have a nice matchup here against Oklahoma City. You have a backcourt of, Russell Westbrook, Terrence Ferguson and Dennis Schroeder. I'm not concerned about that, whatsoever. And hopefully his dud in his last game against Miami will get people off of him a little bit, because this is still a guy that just has, monster usage, tons of assists, and I think is in a really good spot here against Oklahoma City. So I like him a lot. Obviously at the top you have Westbrook, whose price tag's only going to go up. We still haven't seen a monster game out of him yet, but there's nothing to suggest that it's not coming sooner rather than later. So, I like him a lot. It'll be tough for me to get to Lillard, at least on DraftKings, where he's only $800 less expensive than Westbrook. The one spot where I could see doing that is if, it looks like Lillard's going to be something like 5% owned to Westbrook's, 30 or something like that. But, Westbrook's just the better DFS player, so it would have to be a pretty big ownership gap for me. De'Aaron Fox, I think, stands out as an absolutely phenomenal mid-range play, probably my favorite one in that range, going against Atlanta, who is the fastest paced team in the NBA, Trae Young, who is not a quality defender, and Fox is just locked into huge minutes for the Sacramento team. I know he got into foul trouble last game after being questionable to play, but I'm not going to hold that against him at a $6,700 price tag. So I like him a lot. And then on the other side, Trae Young as well in what I think is just going to be a phenomenal game for DFS purposes.
All right. Speaking of phenomenal games for DFS purposes, Adam, I think they're all of them, because I always like to go back and see what does this pace now rank in previous times. We have the last place Pacers, funny enough, because they're, playing the slowest pace. They have 103 possessions per game. We would have to go all the way back to 2013, and they would be third in the league. Otherwise, any point prior to that pace of 100 would be first nearly every season for the 6 years I looked at.
Yeah, the pace this year has just been insane.
Now, remember, there is a difference on the shot clock, how it resets after rebounds, etc. So that is contributing a ton to this. So it's hard to parse out exactly how much faster teams are playing, the earlier shooting within the shot clock, the just taking threes rather than trying to set up for a reasonable elbow shot or backing down into the paint, etc. So it's kind of a combination of factors that has really, really come together as a double catalyst to make everything go that much faster. But holy cow, it's still looking crazy for everybody here. So that's just always an intriguing one to look at. And then, because I just wanted to double check for you, Sacramento 6th, but they're only half a possession out of second. So come on, we're not going to split hairs there. And then Atlanta leads the league with 109.4 possessions per game. That would be like an overtime game in any other year. If a team played an extra 5 minutes each game, they might get to 109. Reining everything back in, we're going to look at shooting guard here. We could potentially see the value appear or disappear, particularly with the Pelicans. If Elfrid Payton is out, we can look at Eton Moore again. If Payton's back, then that kind of mucks things up a little bit, because Drew Holiday has seen his price tag go up. But if we start to look at some of these shooting guards here, we get Buddy Hield finally getting a price bump, $6,400. I'm still comfortable paying that, Adam. I think he's still going to be a keystone play. Last time we saw him, he was like 54 or 5,500 and still just racking up 40 fantasy points per game. Chris Middleton, tougher matchup going against Boston. Boston seems to be, for me, the team this year that I really am not happy targeting players against them. Now we're, a handful of games into the season, but it's seemingly every time they're the opponent, I've been disappointed by whichever player, be it a front court player. Well, hell, two of the teams have been Detroit, so that's not really helping either. But it just seems like they're a tougher matchup, so I'm not as excited to go against them. But then we've got Jamal Murray, who keeps seeing his price go up, sees up to 7,400. Gets a great matchup against Cleveland that their interim coach says he's really not their interim coach. He's just the voice in the locker room.
Yeah, that's a whole really it's getting overshadowed by what's going on in Minnesota. But yeah, we have an interim coach in Cleveland, and Cleveland's refusing to actually give him any sort of change to his contract. So he's just like, okay, well, I might not do this much longer. It's interesting, but yeah, I'm with you on Buddy Hield. The position itself isn't really that strong, I don't think, and Hield in a spot against Atlanta, where I'm just going to love everyone from this game. He's no exception. The one thing to point out would be this guy was, 30 30% owned in lower stakes, 50+% owned in higher stakes against whoever he played the other day when he had the monster
against Orlando.
Yeah, Orlando. Thanks. And so people are going to just keep piling him in. And certainly I think he is, like the best play. He's a great cash play. There's nothing wrong with him in tournaments, but it's probably going to give you a situation where you can make a quote unquote suboptimal, pivot and just get ridiculously better ownership by going to someone, like CJ McCollum against New Orleans. I think is really interesting. We've talked about him a lot. Gary Harris against Cleveland, Jamal Murray against Cleveland. These are all guys that have monster ceilings and can beat Buddy Hield at similar price tags. Kent Bazemore as well. So I do think that while Hield's clearly the top projected player, point per dollar, I think that when you factor in ownership, there are guys you can get to.
Right. And if you look at his last 4 games, I mean, he's shooting from the field just about 52%, and he's hitting not quite half of his three-pointers, about 45%, just eyeballing the math. But he's played 41, 36, 36, and 39 minutes. It's hard to have much more upside than that, making your shots and playing a ton of minutes and getting good volume on your shots with 15, 14, 17, and 20 field goal attempts. He's even been getting to the line in the last 3. He's 6 of 6, 3 of 4, and 4 of 5. So that's where it gets to be a little tricky. It's like, all right, he's played pretty much everything perfectly. He's on in a great matchup. The price is up, but he could have a bad shooting night. Perhaps he would ate the fish instead of the chicken and got an upset stomach. I don't know what's going on, but we do want to consider leverage and where we're getting to the tipping points. But goodness, he is someone that we're going to have to change our calibrations on and how we view him. How are you feeling about like a Gary Harris priced up, but there is no Will Barton? We've got I'm blanking on Monty Morris. I was thinking of Montrezl Harrell. But Monty Morris is in the mix there. What do you like from the Denver side? Because they've got this great matchup against Cleveland. They're on a back-to-back, Denver is, but still, this is just a phenomenal shot against a team that's just not playing defense. They don't really who is the best player right now on Cleveland? I mean, it sounds like Kevin Love could be out for a month, if not more. Yes, I drafted him in my season-long league. Hey, I also had DeJounte Murray. I was excited because last year I drafted Kawhi Leonard in the first round before his injury news. Yet again, this team is just in the toilet bowl, Adam. But what do you got here from the Denver side of things in another good matchup that could be the pivot away from this great Sacramento-Atlanta contest?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at least looking at DraftKings prices, in a vacuum, the Denver guys are a little bit overpriced, with Murray at 7,400 and with Harris at 7K. But there's no question that they have monster upside against a Cleveland team that just is so bad defensively. The game's in Cleveland, and Denver's on a back-to-back, like you said, so hopefully it stays somewhat competitive. I think that it makes them both really good tournament options, even though they don't really fit into a cash game build, I wouldn't imagine. You mentioned Monte Morris. I think that he's someone who is kind of always going to be, at least in his current role until Barton gets back, he's never going to be a core play now that he's up into the mid 4K range, but he certainly has upside and low ownership in his favor. So if you're a max entry guy, he's the kind of guy that I like making sure I have sprinkled into at least, a small percentage of lineups, because he does have upside. He is getting minutes alongside Jamal Murray now, which makes it, easier for him to stay on the floor if he's playing well. So it's not something that, I'm ever excited about, but this is a game against Cleveland where I think everyone on Denver has plenty of upside, and I want to kind of be overweight on as many of those guys as I can be.
All right, let's look down here at some of the cheapies. We've got Patrick Beverley. He is going against Philadelphia. We've got Eton Moore, as I mentioned. If Alfred is back, I don't think it is going to muck with his minutes and projections too much, because they still are going to need some offense. They're still going to need him to do his thing, just not quite as exciting as it was. But at 4,300 on DraftKings, that's pretty cool. If you want a direct pivot, Jordan Clarkson going against Denver's not too shabby. Evan Turner may get some time running the second unit a little bit. What was the last I haven't looked at the last game with McCollum and Lillard. I did see 2 games ago they started to diverge just a touch on some of their playing time. Has that continued, or was that a bit of a game situation where they weren't necessarily playing alongside each other? Because that, of course, would impact what or have a trickle down with what Evan Turner's doing.
I haven't looked at the Houston game yet to see what happened, but I know the game prior to Houston, they did not stagger their minutes. C.J. McCollum still played 100% of his minutes alongside Lillard. The game before that, they had staggered a little bit, but then they went back to not staggering. So I haven't looked at the Houston game, but as of right now, I'm assuming that we're back to what Portland had talked about, earlier in the season about playing them alongside each other.
I am back to the Houston game. That gave me a little bit of time because it was a blowout. None of the starters played in the fourth quarter. Well, I'm not going to count Jake Layman as the starter, but nobody played in the fourth quarter. And McCollum and Lillard matched each other minute for minute in the first 3. So one we want to keep an eye on. This is good news for Evan Turner, but we'll just want to see how that goes. And then the other guy, Lou Williams, sweet Lou. How can we forget? He spent like his first 7 years of his career in Philadelphia, so he should be familiar with the shooting background, right?
Yeah.
You can only say so many things for 160 days of basketball. But Lou Williams, 5,500, sort of intriguing. J.J. Redick, if this game stays close, we've already seen that he will get the third and fourth quarter minutes much more securely and close out over Markelle Fultz. So he would be another discount guy. I'm not going to play him, but Gordon Hayward at 4,800 at some point, the social pricing experiment by DraftKings is going to take over. How low would Gordon Hayward have to get before you play him?
It's gotten at least to where it's like slate dependent. I mean, at 5,300, if it were like a short slate, I would start considering him. On slates like this, I'm still not there. And I won't be really because I doubt his price will get low enough because of his name that I would actually consider him in 25 minutes on a full slate, just because 25 minutes of anyone just caps your upside.
All right. But it's one to watch because would you prefer 25 minutes of Gordon Hayward or 0 minutes of Tyus Jones?
Yeah.
All right. One of your favorite players on the season, Giannis Antetokounmpo, is going to get us over into the small forward position. Of course, this is where Ben Simmons pops up as well. Paul George seen just a continuing uptick in his price. He has been incredibly solid this season. He only has 1 game below 40 fantasy points. However, he only has 1 above 47 fantasy points. This is DraftKings scoring. So he's been in that nice solid range. 9,100, I don't know that there is the, quote, profit yield that could be expected for us, but he did drop 58 against the Clippers in his last start. He's going against a pace-up Charlotte team that is just looking to outscore their opponents. Any of these guys tweak your beak here?
Yeah, so Giannis at the top, obviously. It's a really tough matchup against Boston, but he is affordable as well. He's 11,100 on DraftKings, which is about as good as you're going to get. He's coming back after missing the game against Toronto. Probably won't end up being a cash play just because there are a bunch of options on this slate, and because the matchup against Boston is just so difficult, you don't really have to target that. But in tournaments, there's still no reason not to play the guy that I think is the best guy in DFS. So I will still be, looking at Giannis. Simmons in the matchup against the Clippers, I think is a pretty good one. You do get a discounted price tag off of Giannis. Seems like the guy that if I were looking to pay up at this position in cash, I would probably end up, probably just going to Simmons because the floor is still so high. He does, everything. He's kind of like a mini Giannis in terms of fantasy production. So I like both of those two at the top. Hield, obviously, we already talked about. Paul George, he still has the upside. Like, he's coming off a monster game, but it's not really a spot that I would want to go to against Charlotte just because they do have a bunch of long defenders. They can make life kind of difficult for him. And the fact that Westbrook's there, I mean, it's never like it's not like you have Paul George out there chucking up shots no matter what. In tougher matchups, he can certainly just defer more to Westbrook. So I don't really want to pay up for him. I would much rather get the Ben Simmons.
So here's the guy that's jumping off. Nemanja Bjelica, who is having himself a year at age 30. He has averaged 42 DraftKings points over his last 4 games. He has been dropping the threes. He has been rebounding, which is amazing. And oh, wait for it, almost 2 blocks per game over that stretch. Adam, what's going on? This feels like a Space Jam moment. Somehow he's grabbed the ball and has the power. This has just been crazy. Another phenomenal matchup here. But at some point, the music's going to stop and we're going to be left without a chair if we keep rolling with this guy. Or has a leaf or has a corner been turned?
I mean, when he got an opportunity with Minnesota, he was normally pretty productive. And we've seen more of that here with Sacramento. So I don't have an issue, still playing him in good spots. And I think this is one of them against Atlanta. I like him. I like Taurean Prince quite a bit as well. Prince's price tag is down to $6,900. Going into his last game, I haven't looked at numbers since, but going into, I guess it was Tuesday's game against Cleveland, Prince led the team in usage rate. He plays big minutes. It's a fast-paced spot against Sacramento, so I like Prince quite a bit. He was only like 8% owned on that slate against Cleveland too, so it seems like other people maybe don't share in my love of Taurean Prince. So, more for me in tournaments, I guess.
Well, let me channel my inner fish and say, well, looking at the game logs, good God, he hasn't topped 40 fantasy points outside of game 2 this season. There's no way he can get there, even though he had all the hype and they've turned the keys to the kingdom over to him. There's no way I can play him. Now's when he's going to drop 40 for us, Adam. So I think he is a very fine option. The scoring's there. We just need him to get it all together. I mean, his last 2 games, he's 4 for 23. That's not good. That's like Gerald Green shooting. Numbers. This is it's not good. He's better than that. He's should be about a 46-47% shooter on the average, with upticks where he has good games instead of these abysmal ones.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a point that it can never really be repeated enough. Like paying attention, looking at game logs is fine if you're paying attention to stuff like that. Back a couple of years ago when I first started playing NBA DFS, I was still in law school. I didn't have access to all the tools and stuff that we do now, but one of the easiest, quickest things I did to try and find underpriced guys was just look at people whose price tags were dropping, look at the shots they were taking, or look at their usage, but then look and see where they were just shooting 4 for 21 for 3 games in a row, because that was clearly just dragging their price down. And, we've already seen a couple examples of it this year where, Klay Thompson, we talked about, had a 13% 3-point percentage. And you have people like, oh, Klay just doesn't have upside anymore. It's like, well, no, he just hasn't made a 3-pointer in a week. And then, he goes out and sets the NBA record. So people play to what they've done in the past a very, very, very high percentage of the time. And it ends up being really profitable in tournaments if you catch those spots, because people are getting down on them at the same time that you should be expecting them to rebound.
Well put. The only other guys that I'm looking at down here that kind of pop a little bit, Sam Decker's price got a big jump, but he has seen some more action with Kevin Love out for Cleveland. We also have Cedi Osman, who your mileage may vary. I think he's going to have good games. I think he's going to have just games where you want to punch yourself in the face for having picked him. And some of those are going to come in great matchups, and some of the good games are going to come in, oh my God, I can't believe he did that to Boston or San Antonio or fill in the blank. But what do you think about any of these guys down here? Rodney Hood, their teammate, he was also up to no good. He has been hitting his shots. Here's the reverse of that. He is 17 of 28 in his last 2 games, but he has just been ass the remainder of the season. So that's your opposite of Taurean Prince. What do you like of that trio of Cleveland Cavaliers?
Yeah, I mean, Hood, there's always the upside there. The issue is just that the price tag is starting to rise, and that, like you say, he's been shooting well, and that's really the only thing that is driving the rise. Against Atlanta, we got about 30 minutes from Hood, which is what he's been playing most of the year. So it's not like there was a huge, change there. He just shot really well. Clarkson still, he got 27 minutes, which was more than he normally gets. J.R. Smith being out of the rotation should, I guess, potentially help him. Clarkson would be the one that I prefer, just because he, I think, has the most upside. It's worth pointing out that Colin Sexton played extra minutes because George Hill picked up 2,000 the first 3 minutes of the game. So Sexton checked in earlier. Otherwise, it doesn't look like they were actually intending to give him as much run as he got.
Can we just stop playing George Hill at some point? Is that point now? I just –
So, I mean, he's never really that good of a play anyway, just because of the type of player he is. But I think that at the very least, there is more risk with him now of just something stupid happening in game as far as, getting sat on the bench in the third quarter or whatever, because you have Cavs ownership just, basically insisting on playing the young players, and that includes Colin Sexton. So, right now they still have Hill starting, and, looking at the Atlanta rotations, it appears that Hill still was supposed to play, at least half the point guard minutes, if not more. But I would kind of guess that sooner rather than later, you run into a game where it's just like, oh, George Hill played, 2 rotations today and Colin Sexton played the rest or something like that.
Yeah, so anything that's 5 or more games, and I don't think I'm going to even be looking at George Hill. When he's on the late slate, when he's on these Sunday odd slates, when he's on one of these thin ones, that's where you have to start looking deeper at these guys. And the guys that we dismiss on the larger slates actually come into play again. And it's kind of an interesting look. I do a lot of stuff at Awesemo.com. Use the promo code EARLYBIRD and you get a full week of premium content. One of the free articles that I do in front of the paywall 3 times a week is for the single game NFL primetime slates. And it's funny because I was working on the Oakland and San Francisco game. I would never play anybody from either side on the full slate just because of the way they're banged up and injured, and people have been traded away, and they're on their secondary or tertiary players at so many positions, including the line. But when you're looking at it from a different lens, all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, perhaps Seth Roberts is the best play coming out of Oakland's receiving corps because he's led the team in targets over the last 3 weeks. And good God, Martavis Bryant had 3 and 0 targets. It's stuff like that where you really dive in further, and you have to remember perspective, and you have to remember the player pool, the hand you're dealt, whatever you want to call it, the available options. That's where you get a different look at things. And that's one of the things I wanted to remind everybody. We do have an excellent series on YouTube each day, the strategy show, DFS strategy. Right now we're running the NBA show, and this is Josh Engelman's baby, and then he brings through Adam Orloffy during the week, and then Adam and I chair it on Saturdays. We get to spend a lot more time talking and looking about the different things, the oddities. We can go down a rabbit trail. We can talk about situations that could be coming up. Hey, maybe we don't like this guy in this game, but if we look at the schedule in 2 games from now, he's going to be playing a team where his skill set is just going to know they have nobody that can match up with him because he's cuts in from the wing all the time, and the way they play the defense, they go high on the pick and roll, whatever it is, you can find good things like that and get ahead. So I just want to point out that a lot of times we'll say cursory throwaway things like, I can never play George Hill. And then in our next breath on the next day, it's going to be like, well, you know what? George Hill has some appeal here because X, Y, and Z. So remember, there's a lot more nuance in DFS these days, and there is a lot more information out there. So you got to keep taking it to the next level. And that's what we're doing here for you at Awesemo.com. So check it out. And have some fun with that. All right, Adam, back. Let's do one more pass through here. Let's kind of hit the mid-tier of the small forward, and then we'll jump on to power forward. We've got some crossover guys. Tobias Harris, Nikolai Mirotic, Danilo Gallinari. Anybody here, someone that you would give some consideration to on our 6-game Thursday slate?
Gallinari is someone that I've kind of actually been high on this year, and nobody really plays him. So, I mean, it's not a spot that you need to go crazy, but we have seen Philadelphia, Dario Saric just kind of look like shit on both ends of the floor this year. And Gallinari is going to get that matchup here at only 6,500. He's a guy that, I think you can certainly go to. You probably won't need to have a ton to be overweight in tournaments, but I think he does have a lot of upside. All
right. And you know what his nickname is?
What's that?
Oh, it's the Rooster. They call him the Rooster because Gallo is Rooster in Italian.
I think I knew that was his nickname. I had no idea why.
Well, there you go. But see, that's why we got to work on this cool nickname. Are you familiar with Alice in Chains? They would have been considered an oldies band by the time you were listening to the radio, but they were part of the grunge renaissance.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I can't think of a song off the top of my head, but yes, I'm familiar with Alice in Chains.
That's good. I'm leading you down that path. They have the song "The Rooster," which is, if you heard it, you would say, oh, yeah, I know that one. It's like they come to kill the rooster, but he's not going to die. And it's the guy who's the lead singer of Alice in Chains wrote this about his dad, whose nickname was the Rooster, somehow the story goes. And when he was in Vietnam, it was saying, they were always coming for the Rooster, but he wasn't going to die. And he was, going to turn the tables on whoever was coming for him. That would be like a cool song, cool nickname put together with Gallinari, who already has Gallo as the nickname, and he is the Rooster. So see, there you go. Now you want to play him, right? Because you have a soundtrack in your mind? No, you probably don't. But anyway, this is what happens when we do the shows later than normal, Adam. I get a little bit of crazy time going here.
I will never eat dinner first again.
There you go. Power forward coming down. We've got Julius Randle, intriguing matchup here against Portland. Larry Nance Jr., who is now my computer's frozen and it's taunting me. He is not playing nearly the minutes that we thought he would, the we being the fish like me. He only got 16 in his last one, 23 in the one before that, 28 prior to that. But he was very popular in that matchup against Atlanta. And I had listened to some of our content and said, you know what, I'm not going to play him in this one. It worked out for me because he only had 14 or 15 fantasy points. But again, different matchup than Atlanta. He's got Denver. They've got a bigger front court. What do you like amongst Randle and Nance and those two, Randle and Nance?
Nothing. So, I mean, assuming Anthony Davis plays the second half of the back-to-back, you have that significantly cutting into Julius Randle's upside and playing time because he's, kind of stuck in that timeshare on the short end of the timeshare with Nikola Mirotic and Anthony Davis. And then with Nance, like you mentioned, he's played 0 minutes alongside Tristan Thompson. We do have a new coach. There's still the potential that, the rotations differ from what they were under Ty Lue, but that didn't happen, at least in the first game under, the interim coach, Larry Drew. You had Nance solely playing without Tristan Thompson on the floor. They split the center minutes. Nance, got the short end of it, only played 16 minutes to Thompson's 29, with, Ante Zizic playing a couple minutes of blowout run at the end. So until that changes, it's just a tough spot because Larry Nance is a point per minute monster. I had him projected for 24 minutes against Atlanta, and I still had him projected for a little bit over 30 DraftKings points because he's just that good at producing when he plays. But we just can't, with any confidence, project him to play. So I think the best way to approach Nance until something changes is when he's being touted as, getting an increase because Kevin Love is out, which he's not. It has nothing to do with anything. Then just stay away from him because he's going to be overowned and, more than he deserves. But when people get tired of it, like now, like after the Atlanta game, if people are just like, oh, wow, you know what? Larry Nance isn't playing any extra minutes with Kevin Love out. That would be the time that you can actually get him in some tournament lineups because there are still going to be games where Tristan Thompson plays like 22 minutes and Nance plays, 26, and Nance puts up like 35 points.
All right, as we continue down the pricing list here, nothing overly exciting. We'll need news or some clarification for anything to break. Marcus Morris has been decent his last couple games, but again, his games are either you want him when he's going to play 25 or more minutes, not when he's going to play 25 or less minutes. And his last couple, he's been in the approaching 30. I don't know that we'll see that. Marvin Bagley the third at 5,000. There's someone that's discounted in the game that we're going to want to get a bunch of our action on. And then Zach Collins. Let's use Zach Collins as our pivot. What's going to happen here for the Portland front court with Zach Collins, Yusuf Nurkic, and Anthony Davis as their tormentor on Thursday night?
So it's kind of – Zach Collins is sort of similar to the Larry Nance situation because he's generally very productive, not Larry Nance level productive, but he's generally productive when he does play, but he also is not playing minutes alongside Yusuf Nurkic. And so it means that some games you're going to get 16 minutes from Collins where Nurkic plays 32. Other games, if Nurkic gets in foul trouble or, goes to the bench and Collins plays really well and Collins stays out there, you can get 25 minutes from Collins. So it's just very volatile. He does offer upside at his price point. It's just not someone that you want to have, a ton of exposure to because more times than not, he's not going to get enough minutes because he's stuck behind Nurkic.
Let's get on to the center position and we can close out of the show. Joel Embiid Steven Adams, Willie Cauley-Stein. These are a variety of price points here. We've got Embiid at 5 figures, joined by Jokic for 5 figures. They're both just over 10,000 on DraftKings. Get a nice little $3,000 drop when you get down there to Adams and Willie Cauley-Stein. And if you dip down a little bit below that, you get the guys like Brook Lopez, Dwayne Dedmon, etc. And then we also have a Boban sighting. Boban has played 2 career games against Joel Embiid. I think he has like a grand total of 12 or 14 minutes on the court. Is he going to see 12 or 14 minutes in this game against Embiid?
I think he could, because I'm actually pulling up the Clippers game against Oklahoma City now. So we've seen Gortat not close any games this year. So Gortat starts, he plays like his 18, 19 minutes. Against smaller front courts, we've seen Montrezl Harrell get a boatload of minutes behind Gortat. Against bigger front courts, we've seen Harrell still get 16-ish minutes, but then Boban come in and match up. Like the first game against Oklahoma City, Boban played the entire fourth quarter, matched up against Steven Adams. On Tuesday, he did not. You ended up getting 10 minutes from Boban, and 3 of those were blowout. He wasn't supposed to be on the floor. One disturbing trend for him is that we have seen the Clippers going more to a closing lineup that is small and has, Beverly, Lou Williams, Gallinari, Tobias Harris, and, one other like wing. So that's not good for Boban. He's defensively not good. So like putting him out there just to defend Embiid isn't a thing that I expect to happen. I think that ultimately you could get like 10 minutes out of Boban. If you want to roll the dice on him in tournaments that he can put up 3 fantasy points a minute, which he probably can, then, have 3% or whatever.
And that's one of those good ones when you're playing a ton of lineups. You can goose it a little bit where you can set your exposure cap at 2 or 3% and give a player enough points that he's going to pop in there, but he won't be scattered throughout your 20 or your 150 or however many lineups that you're running. And that's something I started doing a couple games ago with Boban when I think, because I've done enough shows with you, that I've kind of got an understanding of when there's a decent chance he will see the court. Otherwise, I want to go super duper heavy on Montrezl Harrell, because oftentimes these are games do not seem to have a pattern to someone who is not paying attention to the opponent. And people are zigging when it's foolish, and they're not. They're trying to connect the dots, and they have no idea what they're doing. So that's something that you want to take a peek at. Reminder: you can watch Laffy and Josh Engelman go through this at about 9:15 on Thursday morning. So after you're listening to the podcast, that show will be up there on YouTube. It'll be there throughout the day. It's a more leisurely show. So once you get into work, you don't want to burn all your data. You can kind of put your earbuds in and tell your boss you're listening to a seminar. Because technically you are, Adam. It's an education.
Yeah, definitely.
There we go. All right. With that, we are going to cruise on out of here. Adam will have the deeper dive. That is the premium article behind the paywall. We, of course, have Fast Eddie Fear's cash and tournament rankings. We have Osimo himself, Alex Baker, does his report card for all sports for you. You want to see what he's stacking on hockey lines? No problem. You want to see individual players and goalies? He's got that too. You want to look at basketball? Ranked for value and production. He's got all that there with you. We've got ownership projections. The proprietary Alex Baker ownership algorithm pumps out some intriguing ownership. Some of them are uncannily accurate, Adam, and it's kind of a little bit frightening now that I'm tracking that a little bit more, because I've been doing a lot more Fantasy Cruncher because I am playing a bunch of lineups. It's been fun. Use promo code EARLYBIRD, and you will get 1 week free of Osmo Premium content, and that does include the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. If you're already a member of Osmo, you can use that promo code to get a week of the Fantasy Cruncher and test it out as well if you do not have that particular add-on. With that, we're going to get on out of here. You can follow Adam on Twitter at ShipMyMoney. I am at EMACDFS. And you can follow the Osmo main account at Osmo_COM. That's Osmo.com. But there's no dot. It's an underscore because it's Twitter. With that, gamers, good luck.